Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting live stream for round 2 of the Fedex St Jude Championship. Gonna make sure you're ready for all of your exposure tomorrow, whether it's for DFS, Showdown, or over there on the prop side. Also go over any of your questions down there, whatever you guys want to talk about for the next half an hour to an hour. So it's your time. We'll deep dive everything I need to know, and then anything on top of that that you're curious about, just let me know down there in the live chat. Let's go ahead, smash that like button nice and early. Whether you guys are watching this on replay, we love the replay crew down there, or you're already down there in the live chat. First off, you're already down there in the chat. You're an overachiever. You'd love to see it. We got Ross down there who says, solid start. Let's crush it for round 2. Yeah, that's what we're here for. So let's get after it, man. Hopefully you're having a solid Thursday. You got Michael who says, thank you for the content and to keep up the good work. I appreciate the kind words out there. Let's go ahead and get after it for tomorrow. We got Jay Miz who loved that Scotty and Xander pairing. I have to say I have to agree with that. That was absolutely stellar golf today. And luckily, we get it for another 18 holes tomorrow, so it'll be a lot of fun. If you have a question about Cantlay and whether he's an or he could, we'll talk about him here in just a little bit. You got Denny dealing with some torn labrum stuff. Yeah, I saw that report, and I guess it would explain the putting issues, right? I'm not sure how that would affect it, but he's been hitting the ball quite well. So yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. And we also got Phil down there. Hope you guys are having a fantastic evening. Before we deep dive all the action out there for tomorrow, I do want to remind you guys of the sponsor of the live stream. Those, of course, are our friends over there at the Ship It Nation, which are your sources for all your needs on DFS. So here, of course, they've got you covered from the golf angle. But if you're looking to play NFL DFS, which is coming along in just a few weeks, of course, you've got NBA when that season starts, hockey, MMA, you name it. They've got you covered with projections, ownership, process-based tips for all those different sports. And the best part about the Ship It Nation is that you're not going to get price gouged over there either. So if you use code Luke10, that will make already a low price an even better one out there for you guys. And it'll give you access to everything they have to offer. So of course, right, I have nothing but nice things to say about what they have over there and a great partnership over here on the channel. So a lot of you down there probably already very familiar with the Ship It Nation, a lot of the logos down there in chat, but maybe you're a newcomer here. Maybe you're not as familiar with DFS. If you're looking for that all-encompassing membership, Ship It Nation is the place to go. However, let's go ahead. Talk about what we're going to see out there for round 2, which for round 1 wasn't all that interesting when it came to the Showdown slate. I would say that the AM wave was probably the way to go. In fact, if you take a look at the ceiling scores, guys like Chris Kirk had an extremely early tee time. You still had some PM guys that went off like Scotty and Xander, maybe even guys like Hideki that had a late tee time. But a lot of your early starters, and it did play about like a 0.1 shot easier, were coming from the first, let's say 2, maybe 2.5 hours of tee times, which is usually to be expected out there on the PGA Tour course, as conditions will be a little bit softer towards the beginning half of the day. And also you normally have lower winds. Now today it was pretty flat between the AM and the PM wave, but that receptiveness did lead to a slight difference in conditions. And just not to get too far ahead of ourselves, I think it's going to be even a bigger difference out there for Friday. So speaking of that, let's just go ahead and show you what I'm talking about. So we mentioned this a little bit when we had our live stream yesterday, but it does look like the morning wave for Friday is going to have slightly lower winds than the afternoon. And this actually just updated about 15 minutes ago. And beforehand, it was an even smaller difference than what we had now. So earlier, there was actually a little bit of wind in the morning. It was closer to like 7-8 miles an hour. Now you're talking about pretty much no wind until midday. And then it's going to kick up real quickly out there to like 12 to 17 miles an hour of sustained winds. Your wind gusts are going to be there early. You can see they're in like the low teens around 9-10 a.m. Your sustained winds are going to be much lower at that time though. But by the time you get to when it's like 96 degrees, it's going to be hot out there. It's going to be baking out as the day goes on. Those conditions are looking to get a lot spicier, both from the firmness factor and potentially for that wind as well. So unlike today, which was only about a 0.1 shot difference, tomorrow could be where it is like a 0.5 shot difference between the two waves. And I did mention that for main slate lineups that I took a few of my builds and did slant them towards the PM guys today, as I we did see that forecast out there for Friday. And based on this last update, which again, this happened less than 15 minutes ago, it looks like that's going to be even more so the case out there for tomorrow. So I was already going to attack some of the morning guys, but with this latest forecast, I think it's an even better idea to go out there and do so. So I was going to mention that you might want to go like 75 to maybe 80% AM guys for tomorrow. Now my recommendation would switch. I only have like maybe 1-2 guys towards the middle to latter half of tee times. And after we get off live stream here, there's a good chance that I take those 2 players out, because if I was going out there only entering 4 or 5 lineups tomorrow, why not take a shot on some of these early starters? They're not all going to be lower owns, right? You still have some chalk that's going off early, but you're going to get the slightly better side of the draw. And today you saw a lot of players take advantage of that. So I do think it's a slate where you might want to consider that weather angle before going out there and playing. And I don't think it's definitive. I don't think it's like 100% going to be this massive advantage. But if the winds do kick up as the day goes on, if it does firm up just like what we had for today, I can't imagine that there's going to be less than a 0.3, 0.4 shot difference, maybe even up to something like 0.5 to 0.7 shots. And I know that doesn't sound crazy. A lot of you are probably rolling your eyes at like a half a stroke difference, but it has a massive impact on your long-term ROI. It's not just about the average score. We have to take a look after tomorrow's slate and figure out whether their ceiling rounds were different. Usually the average score will only be like a half a stroke difference, but a lot of times when we go back and look at the guys that were getting to 5-6 under, sometimes it's 75 to 80% of those performances coming from the side that was only half a stroke easier. So once again, I know it doesn't seem like a massive difference, but you know, for a main slate, that could be a difference of 5, maybe 7% in terms of made cut rate. And when you're entering 150 lineups, if you're entering 150 lineups for round 2 showdown, any edge like that is going to add up. So that's why we take a look at the weather. It's why we spend so much time going over it and whatnot, because even the slimmest of margins can be exploited and can really help you out with your long-term ROI. So that's it for Showdown. We'll talk about some of those players that I'm looking at and more specifically what I'm looking for out there in players for tomorrow. So we're going to first off shift our focus over there to the DFS side of things. And then afterwards, we'll talk about some of our props. So for DFS, as I said, we're going to go through some of the options that I'm playing, not so much to give you guys to use yourself. You can pick and choose them, right? Guys you agree with, go out there and you can use in your lineups, but it's more so to show you guys what I'm looking for in players. So mouth is getting a little dry. Let's get a sip of water over here and catch up on the chat. What's going on, Rev Cloud? What's going on, Phil? With the weather report, what does the second set of smaller numbers mean under the larger MPHs? So let's go back. I think you have it backwards. The smaller numbers are going to be on top of the larger numbers down below. The larger numbers down below, those are going to be your wind gust, right? So over here on the left side, this is cut out for you. Let me double check. Yeah, so if I take your comment down, you'll be able to see it on there. Actually, yeah, this is probably the best way to show you. Let me retry this on here. 1 second. All right, I'm screwing this all up. That's my apologies, guys. This is probably the wow. I tried to do something different on here, and now I'm really screwing up the format. So yeah, okay. Now we're back to what I wanted to show you. You can see that it's the wind gusts on the bottom, and then the sustained winds on top. So I had to move around a bunch of figures on here to show you that, but you can see in there the stuff on top is what's going to be blowing consistently, right? Those are your sustained winds, and then the number under that is where it's going to be picking up to. So obviously when you have a variable wind, sometimes they'll be ranging between like 7 to 20 miles an hour. It looks pretty variable out there tomorrow, right? In the mornings you got like a range of about 7 to about 18 mile an hour wind gusts, and then in the afternoon it's like a 12 to 30 mile an hour wind gust. So it's variable conditions for sure, and that is what that is showing you. Great question, and definitely something that you want to know, that's for sure, if you haven't already seen the windy.com forecast over there. Let me make sure that the formatting on this is all good, and then we'll hop on in. He said, Barry says to smash the like button for our boy Luke. Rye round 2 for the smash spot. I'm playing Aaron Rye, so I sure hope he goes out there and has that sort of round. And yeah, go out there and hit that like button if you guys haven't already. Jay Miz says, who was Hideki's new caddy? He was locked in. It's Royo Hisatune's caddy. So yeah, DePicha was on top of that one down there. I'm not sure the guy's name, but he speaks Japanese. I'm sure that makes Hideki a little bit more comfortable out there. And yeah, he was absolutely locked in. All right, let's talk about a few guys I'm getting to. So once again, if you agree with the plays, feel free to go ahead and use them yourself. But the far more important aspect here is the reasoning on why I'm playing certain players. And and up top, there's really only a few guys that are playing in the quote unquote morning wave. That'd be Scotty at 10:35, also a Xander Schauffele going off at the same time. But you can see like a Rory and Colin Morikawa are at 1:45 p.m. Love to go Bears going off relatively late. And you don't really get to like an 9 a.m. tee time until we get down here to like a Victor Hovland, Corey Connors. So we'll talk about Hovland here in a little bit. I also think that Corey Connors is at a pretty solid spot himself. But up top, there's really only like 3-4 guys to choose between. And in terms of the guys that are 10K plus, the one that hit the ball the best today was Xander Schauffele. Scotty Scheffler, believe it or not, gained a bunch of strokes with the flat stick. And in fact, he had one putted his first 5 holes. That included a par save on the par 5, where he had to make someone from like 15 feet to go out there and save par. So while it was nice for Scotty to go off, I had him for main slate. I had him for some props today. So, I'm not going to complain about that by any means. It does feel slightly unsustainable. He does not have the best track record around this golf course. And if he hits the ball the same way that he did today, I can't see him paying off a $12,000 price tag. Now, it is Scotty Scheffler. It's world number 1. Honestly, I fully expect him to rebound in some sort of way. But when I'm trying to choose between him and then Xander Schauffele, that looked a whole lot sharper today, and Scotty is still higher owned than where I have Xander Schauffele, he's also over $1,000 more expensive. Well, that's where it starts to lean towards Xander Schauffele. So that's why I'm taking that direction. You don't have to play either one in your lineups. But in terms of guys that are going off relatively early, again, your options are pretty limited. You could throw out a Patrick Cantlay at 10:15. He's got a relatively early tee time. Also, Hideki Matsuyama. The one thing I'd say about Hideki is that because he shot -5, he's also going to be pretty popular out there for round 2 Showdown. So on top of just looking at shots gained metrics, right, trying to find guys that have a sustainable skill set, we also have to consider the ownership angle. And on top of going out there and, like I said, using some of those DFS fundamentals, I think the biggest edge to go out there and exploit for round 2 Showdown is to go out there and know that overreactions are going to happen. It's like week 1 of the NFL season. This will happen out there in a few weeks. The teams that go out there and win handedly week 1, maybe go out there and upset one of the best teams in the league, are going out there and winning the Super Bowl, right? There's going to be a team, maybe it's like the 49ers, maybe it could be like the Chiefs, Eagles, one of those superpowers out there, hell, Cowboys, right? They go out there, maybe get embarrassed week 1. If any of that happens, it's going to be like the sky is falling after week 1 in the NFL. You're going to hear the coaches on the hot seat. I mean, everything is going to be on the table, right? After that same kind of situation, the same thing happens after round 1 of the golf tournament, right? The guy in first, Chris Kirk, right? He's obviously going to win the golf tournament, right? And we'll put that out there in quotes. All those guys like Pavon, that shot -5, like clearly you're going to have him out there for DFS. These are the kind of things that your slapdick fans will say to themselves. And that impacts ownership, right? That's usually the case for Showdown. Usually the top end of the leaderboard is too highly owned. But after round 1, that is especially the case. There are no placement points in play. And most importantly for round 2 Showdown, there's only been 18 holes played. It's the smallest of sample sizes humanly imaginable. And if you're overreacting to what you saw for a single day and you're making that your entire process, well, I'm just here to tell you that you're going to be donating a lot of money out there in GPPs. And frankly, sharps like myself and people that play the ownership game are going to be glad to take your entry fees out there in large field GPPs. So you should be playing the game. You should not be overreacting to round 1. Now, that doesn't mean that you can ignore the 18-hole sample size, but in the case of somebody like Hideki versus a Patrick Cantlay, Hideki should not be twice the ownership of Patrick Cantlay, right? Just because he had a much better round 1 performance. Both have had pretty decent track records around TPC Southwind. And in terms of their round 2 projection, they're within like 1.5 points of each other. So there's little to no difference between each option for round 2. So if somebody's going to be double the ownership, right, then take a Patrick Cantlay. Now, the ownership difference between Scotty and Xander is negligible. As I said, both are relatively high owned. But with the other options where it's like double the ownership sometimes, it makes your process relatively simple. If you go out there, you just quote unquote play the ownership game out there with your player pool, you're going to have a relatively decent time out there in terms of your success. It's not like you can randomly pick names, right? That's not what I'm telling you to do. But if you go out there, you break ties by taking the lower owned player, sometimes it's that easy out there for your round 2 showdown. So our fundamentals for round 2 showdown are go out there, play the weather edge, which I think is to take some of the earlier starters. Number 2, play the ownership, as I mentioned. Number 3, probably the last thing to consider, but still important, are whether they hit the ball sustainably out there in round 1. And just because they hit the ball, poorly in round 1 does not mean that you have to avoid them, right? I will say, though, that if they're going to be chalky, right, if they're going to be, let's say, like 10, 15% owned, and you plan on taking them in 25 to 30% of your lineups, they better have hit the ball well, right? But if there's somebody like Viktor Hovland that is only 9.8% owned, then maybe they don't have to have hit the ball that well. And in fact, if you take a look at Hovland's shots gained metrics, they were absolute dog shit round 1. He could not hit the broadside of a barn. He gained most of his strokes around the green, which is pretty much the opposite of what we want to see. But he's the perfect example of an or he could sort of player. I know somebdy asked about Patrick Cantlay. He's that same sort of option, right? Could go out there, could easily turn things around, especially as somebody that's nearly won at this golf tournament before. Viktor Hovland, by the way, outside of hole number 18 last year, where he played it, I think, like +4 over the 4 rounds, could have easily won the golf tournament last year. Obviously, BMW Championship got the job done and over there at Eastlake, but at single-digit ownership. You can see I've got him at 9.8% right there. His projection is just as high, if not higher, than some of the other players around him because he's a very high birdie or better percentage player and is extremely aggressive. And if you take a look at the birdie stats from 2024, you would probably think he's struggling, right? Especially because the finishes haven't been all that solid. But he's still a top 50 player on tour in the category. And that is despite him not having nearly any top 10 finishes to speak of, which just speaks to the kind of showdown scorer that he is, right? He's very aggressive. He's capable of making 6-7 birdies in a single round. And though he hasn't had a lot of tournaments where you can put it together, a lot of times he will pop off for 2-3 rounds at a time. So I love him for showdown. I think he's a better showdown play this week than what he was for the main slate. And now that he's teeing off early, right, even with the shitty shots gained metrics, he's checking 2 of the boxes we're looking for, right? He's got the early tee time. He's got all the leverage that we're looking for in the world. And while it would have been great for his, approach stats to be better than what they were out there for today, there's a reason why he's low owned, right? He's the kind of play that, you're not going to be taking in like half of your lineups because he's only 10% projected owned. And maybe a quarter of them, right? Maybe 30% of lineups, you're taking somebody like Viktor Hovland, and that would be leverage to the field right there. So hopefully it gives you an idea of some of the leverage options that I'm getting to. And once, like I said, if you're going to take somebody that really played shitty round 1, they better be low owned, right? If they've got losses with the ball striking stats, if they couldn't keep the ball on planet Earth out there, and they're chalk, you better be avoiding them out there in your lineups. What's going on? I appreciate that, Phil. Good evening, Samuel. And who are the top bounce back golfers? So I think that Hovland is probably towards the top of my list. I'd say that Cantlay is definitely in play as well. And there'll be a few others that we talk about here, Sam. So just stay tuned and you'll have a few options to choose from. So in terms of ownership in this range, I already mentioned Hideki getting some. I'd say that Tommy Fleetwood also pretty uncomfortably owned. Also a later tee time, so I just don't have as much interest there. Down here in the 8K range, ownership is a little bit more spread out, mostly because no one had that great of a day, right? Your best scorers down here are like a JT at -3, a Sam Burns at -3 as well. And while both are some of the higher owned options in this range, nobody's going to be over 20%. So this 8K range in general is, I think, a spot where you can kind of just take your guys. Thigala is not going to be just taking one of my guys. He's definitely a planned pivot spot that I'm trying to get to. But if there are a few higher to maybe like mid-owned plays that you like here, I don't think it's the worst range to get exposure. Like, for example, Russell Henley is like 15, 16%. Cameron Young, for example, is about like 15% projected owned. No one in this range is going to make you throw up when it comes to the ownership. So if there's any of the guys down there that you really liked their shots gained metrics, maybe consider adding them to your pool. The one thing I would add on top of that, right, is make sure they have an early tee time. And the ones that I guess would be in play would be like a Russell Henley, and Aaron Rai has a 9:30 a.m. tee time. And Aaron Rai also hit the ball really well today, but just could not buy a putt for his life. So I know Barry Barry mentioned him down in the live chat before, but I think he's a really good spot for a bounce back as well, and does have that early tee time. Another player, I guess, would be Sam Burns. He's also got a 920 start, but as I mentioned, a little bit higher owned than somebody like an Aaron Rye. So it's not like you're going to get a ton of leverage by using that sort of play, but he's also not mega chalk down there in that range. The guy I really wanted to point out, though, here for the live stream is Sahith Theegala at a 10:25 tee time. It's getting towards the border of what I consider early out there for round 2, but you play Sahith Theegala when nobody is playing him in Showdown. He's the sort of player that will show no form, then go out there and shoot something like -6, -7. And really, my favorite spot in the world to go out there and play Sahith is after he blows up round 1. When he goes out there, just cannot hit a fairway for his life, right? He gives you no breadcrumbs of going out there to play him, is the best time to play Sahith Theegala. He's a field player. Field players sometimes wake up and they just don't have their best stuff. And I think overreacting to an 18-hole sample size is a fool's errand with anyone in the field, but particularly when it's Sahith Theegala, right? Somebody that will do that regularly out there on the PGA Tour. So kind of like Victor Hovland, I think that he's an even better showdown play at this kind of golf course than what we have for the main slate, because his driving inaccuracy is going to cause him troubles at times. For a main slate where you can move down, right, 10, 20 spots with a double bogey, that is going to be sub-ideal. But for Showdown, where there is no placement points in play, it's a completely different ball game, right? It's all about going out there, having birdie or better horsepower, and he's got that in bunches. So my favorite plays in this range are some of the lower owned, earlier starters. Obviously, Sahith, one that I wanted to point out, but if you couldn't tell, I'm also playing quite a bit of Aaron Rye for tomorrow, and he gives you that early tee time and relatively low ownership. One thing I'll say about Rye, if you're looking for like a cash play or a single entry, he's probably the quote unquote safer option between him and Sahith, just because his ball striking was a little bit better. Sahith, let me double check the shots gained metrics on the other tab, but I know it wasn't that great. So he ended up at what, even par by the end of his round. So I'm trying to find him on here. There he is. So he ended up gaining on approach, losing with both of the ball striking categories, was also slightly into the positive off the tee. Like that's totally fine. I actually thought the shots gained metrics were even worse for Sahith than they were, but it's not like they were flashy. They weren't great in any one category, but he was about neutral in all four. And if anything, that short game, which is usually his strong suit, was what held him back a little bit out there today. So there's definitely some room for improvement there, and both are going to be extremely low owned. Of course, Samuel, I've got you. And Phil says, you feel like it's going to be your boy Malnati during the wildest time. That could be disastrous. You won it, though. So, yeah, Malnati is another one of those loose cannons where if he plays well one round, you probably want to avoid him the next, and vice versa. If he plays really poorly out there one day, sometimes you go out there the next day and have a good bounce back. There are a few guys you could say that about. Wyndham Clark is one. I don't think you can really overreact to an 18-hole sample size with him. Whereas there are guys where if they don't have it one day, are almost certainly not going to have it the next. Those sort of players, I'm thinking about Siwoo Kim, right? He's not the kind of guy that normally bounces back that well. Yeah, it's crazy how certain players like react differently, that's for sure. Late hopping in, do we like Connors? Yeah, I think he's an all right play. It's not my favorite option. It's not somebody I wanted to point out here in the live stream, but early tee time, hit the ball decent enough out there in round 1. So if he checks a lot of the boxes I'm looking for, he's not mega chalky. He's on the right side of the weather. And like I said, he didn't hit the ball beautifully by any means, but it wasn't horrible. And just to give you some of the shots gained metrics, he gained on approach, and then he lost with the 2 short game categories and was a slight loser off the tee. So if there's any one category, right, where we want them to still be into the positive, it's with that iron play. And he was able to accomplish that today. Thoughts on Max Homa? So we'll get to that here in a few minutes, Gavin. I want to hold off on that question until we talk about the value guys, but I'll make sure to give you some thoughts on them, man. All right, speaking of, let's move a little bit further down the board. So the ownership in the 8K range, I've already mentioned, was pretty spread out. Down in the 7K range is where it starts to get a little bit more polarized. Your guys that shot over par in round 1 are going to start to be like sub 5% here. Whereas your players that went out there shot -5, like a Taylor Pendrith, are sometimes 10% or even higher owned. So unlike the 9-10K range where you can get different in a few spots, you guys saw, right, some pivots that I'm taking. This 7K range is where it is absolutely imperative to go out there and get different. This is the range where guys like a Taylor Pendrith, a Ben Griffin, a Robert McIntyre, let's see, a Pavon, a Justin Rose, a Denny McCarthy are guys that I'm pretty much never going to get to. And in fact, I think of all those guys I mentioned, maybe one of them is out there in my player pool. A vast majority of these guys, Brendan Todd, you would throw into that conversation. Chris Kirk, of course, there it is -6 score. Are all going to be 2, sometimes 3, 4 times higher owned than some of the guys around them, where you might be able to get away with some chalk up top, right? Up top, you don't have to get different at all 6 spots in your lineup. You can't be taking a bunch of chalk down low, right? Unless you're forcing in some mega low-owned guys towards the top end of the board. So what you'll see here with the guys that we're pointing out is that almost all of them are sub 10%. So except Straka, I've got it 9.7%, right? He's far from chalky out there for tomorrow. And Eric Cole at just 5.6%, a Harris English at 4.5%. And then down here, Patrick Rogers also at just 4.1%. My leverage in most cases is going to be coming from these sort of players. And if I'm mixing in some leverage pieces down here in that 6-7K range and using, let's say, a Victor Hovland, it's totally fine if I have a chalky Xander Schauffele in lineups, right? And it's totally fine if I even have like one more piece of chalk in that kind of lineup, because the rest of my spots, 3 or 4 of them out there in lineups, are going to be some of those low-owned players. So that's what I would say about the 7K range, is that the ownership starts to get a lot more spread out, mostly because there are so many players to choose from, right? When you have more options, when the pricing is a lot more condensed, it's going to spread out the ownership, right? There's not going to be as much chalk there, but what you do get are the guys that are getting ownership, which in most cases is the top of the leaderboard. Those guys are going to be exceptionally chalky because it's like everyone's landing on the same sort of players. And like I said, if you like 1 or 2 of them, maybe you get away with playing them, but the rest of them I'd be fading personally. Unless you absolutely love a chalky piece down here in the 7K range, I would have a hard time getting exposure myself. Speaking of a few of these pivots, Sepp Straka has elite tier course history here, is also a much better putter on Bermuda grass than he is on any other surface, a very accurate driver of the golf ball, which should suit him quite well around this kind of golf course, and a 9:55 AM tee time. So he's got maybe not the lowest ownership, right? 9.7%. I wouldn't classify that as a true diamond in the rough by any means, but relatively low ownership, perfect tee time, also the kind of shots gained metrics that are decent enough for round 1 that hopefully he can improve on it a little bit and shoot someone like -3 or -4 tomorrow. So definitely somebody I'm mixing in there. And Eric Cole, pretty disappointing day as well. Also shot +1, but does have the kind of tee time where he can turn it around. The form heading in was much better than what we saw towards the beginning of 2024. Lately, right, he's number 23 in recent form ranking, and another one of these Bermuda grass specialists. So you get him back on his sort of grass. He's from South Florida, right down here where I'm from. I'm very used to this sort of agronomy. You give him 5% ownership out there for round 2, and I'll be a buyer, right? If he was 10, 15% chalk, I would have no interest right down here with Eric Cole, but we're actually getting him at a pretty reasonable ownership number. Harris English has won multiple times around TPC Southwind. This is a golf course where he's absolutely made a living over his career. And at sub 5% ownership, I'll take that all day. He actually played quite well out there today. But because Pavon's at that same price tag, because you have guys like Rose, McCarthy that are just $100 cheaper, I mean, even Brendan Todd's taking away ownership down there at 6,400. There's just not enough exposure to go around to get him over that 5% mark. So I think if you're looking for a leverage play, an early tee time, and a guy with elite tier course history, that is exactly what you're going to get with Harris English. So another one of these guys that is really good at putting on Bermuda grass. And if you can't tell, that is something I'm trying to look at here on the board. I know we had a question about Max Homa, so I do want to circle back on him. He's also got an early tee time and is just a much better player than the price tag. So I know we didn't point him out here as one of my highlighted plays, but I am using him myself out there in my exposure because of the tee time, because of just the absolute, long-term pedigree, just a high upside player. However, the shots gained metrics were not ideal for round 1. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that he lost about a stroke on approach in round 1 and that his biggest gain was around the green. His second biggest gain was out there with the flat stick, which can be an unsustainable sort of performance, but he's relatively low owned. I still have Max Homa at sub 10%. He's also only $7,100, which is just, again, an absolute steal when it comes to the price. So I think he makes a lot of sense out there in lineups. So I did want to circle back on that. I did not forget your comment about it. And yeah, again, if there's any other players you want my full take on, just let me know, guys. But I do want to talk about our last option here, Patrick Rogers, which not usually my favorite guy to use, but I do think he's a solid option for round 2. So let's talk about the P-Rod show. So Patrick Rogers got 8:30 tee time. That is prime time out there for tomorrow morning. He's only 4.1% owned. He's actually playing well. If you guys didn't know, his recent form heading into this event, he's gaining about a stroke and a half per round to the field. He's only $6,200. So kind of like a Hovland, kind of like a Thigala, that I don't love playing these guys out there for main slate. He's the perfect showdown sort of player. I mean, one of these rounds, he's probably going to shoot +4, +5. Hell, might even be round 2 showdown. And he goes out there and shoots like 4 or 5 over par. What I can tell you is he's probably going to shoot 4 or 5 under par, one of those rounds as well. He's one of the few guys that has a lot of upside. He's a good iron player when he's playing his best golf. Usually one of the best putters, period, out there on the PGA Tour as well. And lately has been lighting it up out there on the greens. So if we can find any semblance of iron form, which again, he's a little bit hit or miss in that category, that's where we might potentially get that ceiling round. So the form was a little sketchy round 1, -1. It's not like it's going to be a sexy score out there in terms of round 1 performance, but that's also why he's only about 4.1% owned. I've got Chris Kirk at double that ownership. Hell, I've even got guys like Seamus Power higher owned. I've got Brendan Todd at about double the ownership as well. And there's no such thing as placement points out there for round 2 showdown. So give me a high upside player. Give me the guy in this range that has the number 2 form heading in. You can see Johnny Vegas, 1.6 shots gained per round. I think he's going to get some attention because of that, even in the PM wave. But P. Rogers quietly playing that same kind of golf lately and has the early tee time. So I like that aspect for it. And again, he's got a low floor. It's Patrick Rogers, for goodness sakes. He's only $6,200. So you're getting what you're paying for at a certain point. But if you're trying to play a Xander, especially if you're trying to get to like a Scotty Scheffler up top, he does give you a ton of salary flexibility. And for that reason alone, might be worth adding to a few lineups. So those are the highlighted plays. Those are a few of the players that I wanted to point out. Once again, does not mean that you have to take all of them yourself. More so, just want to spitball a few ideas past you and show you what I'm looking for in players. If you couldn't tell, a lot of that is weather-based, as I was talking about before, but ownership and then that shots gained metric, particularly those ball striking stats, are the 2 other main things that I'm looking at for round 2. So I don't think you have to overthink it. I think a lot of times people try and galaxy brain themselves into any sort of slate, when in reality, your player pool can come down to just a few constraints, right? There's really only 3 things that I'm considering out there for round 2 showdown. Just don't give yourself paralysis by analysis. If you're out there, you're trying to weigh like 15 different factors in your round 2 showdown pool. If you're a computer, you might be able to do that, right? If you're Rain Man out there, maybe you can pull that sort of thing off. In reality is you should probably be simplifying your process a little bit. So try and take out some of that extra thought, right? Try and make your process a little bit more streamlined. Not only is it going to help you make better decisions, as I said, that paralysis by analysis, you want to avoid that as much as possible, but it's going to make your life easier too, right? Just not having to overthink 10 million factors for every single play. Play of the weather, play of the ownership. And if you can, like I said, the last thing, find guys that are hitting the ball well. Let's catch up on chat, and then we'll move on a little bit further. So where are we at? Any interest in Keegan? So I'm at like a 6.5 out of 10 on Keegan Bradley, I would say. So just to find him on here, you can see he has the 9 a.m. tee time. That's where a majority of my interest comes. He's a player that I liked at this golf course heading in. So I think a solid course fit player out there around this track. So, yeah, I'm at like a 6.5, 7 out of 10, which for a $7,000 player is a pretty decent score out there in my sentiment. So it's yeah, there's a good chance he's in my exposure. Let's put it that way. What's going on, Michael? You're pretty sure you saw a ton of people hammering the over on strokes for players, but seemed unaware it was a par 70. Yeah, if you're entering overs on strokes and you don't know the par of a golf course, that's a pretty tough scene. I took a bunch of unders today, Michael. Actually lost a little bit of money on props. It was very slight. It was about a break-even day, all things considered. But I took unders and I had a few guys go over. So I agree with you. Easy course. A lot of guys did go under their strokes, but not everyone did. I wish they did, or else I would have made a lot of money today. But I tend to agree with you there, man. What's going on, Phil? Is this the time that you use D-Tree if you're gutsy enough? So let me take a look at the tee time. I'm not sure when he's teeing off. So yeah, he's got a 12:20 tee time. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but if I was going to get gutsy on someone, Phil, it probably wouldn't be Thomas Dietrich. You know, if you're going to take a shot on somebody, why not take them as an early tee time, right? Like try and find somebody that's going off before maybe 10 a.m. would be my way to go about. Again, you don't have to listen to me out there, but personally, I'd probably try and lean into the weather a little bit. Yeah, Gianni, a big Justin Rose guy. Yeah, a good round for your guy out there, that's for sure. What's going on? Larry said, like that like button. Giuseppe Straka going low tomorrow. Yeah, dude, that's one of the best nicknames in golf, by the way, Giuseppe Straka. I love it. I think it was the Tour Junkie guys. I heard that from first. So props to them out there for that nickname. And yeah, hit the like button, guys. What are you guys waiting for out there? And got any picks for Prize Picks and Underdog? Yeah, we'll be talking about props here in a few minutes. So yeah, if you just hang around here for a little bit, maybe like 5 minutes, you'll have everything you're looking for. So before we completely cycle into the prop side of things, we're going to talk through a DFS lineup together. So we're going to bring up Draftkings. We're going to build a lineup as if I'm entering it out there in the large 150 max to give you an idea of the lineup construction. So I know we talked about like what I'm using to find guys I want to play, but the other added aspect of DFS, right, is not just like who you're going to play, it's how you're going to play them, right? You've probably heard this saying from a few other content creators, but it's not who you play, it's how you play them. Who you play matters, right? Finding a player pool is one aspect of it. But even if there's chalk that you like, usually there are creative ways to play some of that chalk and still get a little bit different to the field. So what we're going to talk through here are what I'm thinking about first off when I'm going out there and clicking names, and some of the things you might want to consider yourself when you're going out there and entering a contest. And we're not going to do the full lineup construction rant. If you guys were here for like the week-long live stream yesterday, you guys know what I'm talking about, where we went to a complete deep dive into what you're thinking about in each contest. This is going to be for the large field GPP. That's where all my exposure is going to be for tomorrow. And this is essentially going to be us trying to find a bunch of leverage plays. Because as I mentioned yesterday, right, if you're going out there and entering like the big 150 max, you got to beat a shit ton of other entries. You've got to go out there and have the absolute nuts. And when you pull that off, when you have all the best plays, you don't want to share them with the entire field. So even if we start with a Xander, he's going to be pretty chalky himself. We're going to have plenty of spots to get different here. So I'm going to start with a Shoffley. I'm going to throw Cantlay as my second man in. We're going to throw in an Aaron Rye. So pretty much right off the bat, right, we have one piece of chalk, but we have two guys that we can say are offsetting that quite a bit. I'm going to go down to $6,200 and throw in a P. Rogers. That's going to help us out a lot when it comes to that flexibility. And what you can see here, right, is I do that nice and early, right? If I'm going to use a super cheap guy like Patrick Rogers, I try and get that done out of the way, right? So that I know where I stand for my last two players, which you can see is about 72.5 remaining. They've got 3 pivots in here, one piece of quote unquote chalk. So as long as our last two guys are medium to low owned, we're going to be just fine out there in the large field GPP. So for the sake of this lineup, I'm going to throw in a Tom Hoagie who, let me double check the tee time, but I'm pretty sure, yeah, it goes off at 9:40 a.m. And then we're going to go ahead and round out this lineup with a $7,600 golfer, and I guess Straka would make a lot of sense over there. So that's the kind of lineup you'd want to go with for large field GPP. Even if you didn't want to be as aggressive, let's say like a $6,200 Patrick Rogers, we're still at $6,900 remaining here. So if you went up a little bit more expensive, perhaps threw in like, I don't know, Ben Griffin, I don't know, your favorite option down there in that range, you can find a bunch of guys to mix in. And even with a chalky like Xander Schauffele up top, you can see we had no issues when it came to the ownership. And in fact, even if we wanted to extend this to one more popular play, so let's say you like an early Hideki, right? You want to ride that for him. He's also got an early tee time. You could pull that off as well. So you could go Xander, Hideki as your second man in. And still, as long as your last two guys in here are relatively low owned, you're going to have no issues when it comes to the large field GPP. So let's throw P. Rogers in there again. And then at $7,700, maybe you try to not to take a mega chalky guy, but no one at that price tag is mega chalky. So I think a Benny Ann with his early tee time could be potentially in play here for round 2. So that kind of lineup would make sense as well. So whether you're going a little bit chalkier up top with maybe 2 chalky guys, or going with only 1 or 0 chalky guys towards the top end of the board, as long as your 6, 7K players aren't going to be like 10, 15%, you're pretty much good based on that alone, right? So as I said, simplifying your process is, I think, going to be your friend long-term. It's going to save you time. It's going to make you make better decisions as you're not overthinking things. Get different in the 6, 7K range, right? Commit to that ahead of time, right? If you know that you're like, all right, I'm not going to take the donkey chalk guys down low, it simplifies your process. Up top, you can kind of ignore ownership if you go out there and take that kind of angle. Personally, I still like some pivots up top. You saw that with guys like Hovland and Asahit Thagala. But if you truly wanted to make it just like a straightforward slate, from 8K plus, you could probably ignore ownership out there in Showdown. As long as from 8K and below, you're avoiding all those mega chalky players. So that's it for the lineup construction segment. Hopefully that helps a little bit. And we'll talk about props here in a minute. What's going on, Gianni? What do I do for a day job? I do this. I do PGA DFS stuff, Michael. I used to be an electrical engineer before I decided to do this full time. So I do this. I have a Patreon page where I post my projections. I obviously get paid ad revenue from some of my sponsors, also by YouTube, Twitter, all that sort of stuff. So this is what I do, man. It's something that I started doing about 1.5 years ago, and it's an absolute blast. I enjoy covering golf. I get to do my passion day in, day out, and it pays pretty well too, if you're able to build it up and stick with it. So it's obviously something that I've been working on for quite some time, and we've gotten it to this stage. What's going on, Zach? We've got a big tone question. Is he here to wave at the fans or primed for the bounce back? Oh, only if we knew the answer to that, Zach, right? Let's take a look at the tee time, because I don't know that one off the top of my head. So Tony Finau goes off at what? 10:05. So he's got an okay tee time. Let's look at the shots gained metrics. I think it'll tell us a whole lot about his chances out there. So he shot -1. It's not like he had a horrible day, but he carried himself with the short game. So you can see here, right, he gained 1.2 strokes with the putter, 0.77 strokes with the around the green play, and lost 2 strokes ball striking. That is a tough C. He's not the kind of player that normally does that, right? Normally, he's a stout ball striker that will lose strokes around the green and with the putter. It troubles me, but I don't know if it troubles me enough to say that you can't play him, right? Tony Finau could bounce back, right? It's only an 18-hole sample size. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that he's out there just to wave to fans and to have a good time quite yet. He goes out there tomorrow and he loses strokes with the ball striking. Then I think we can have that conversation, right, on whether he's actually here to play golf. But it's only 18 holes, that's for sure. Pavon drafted under 2% with the 5th at the U.S. Open. Doesn't make sense. The form outside of those performances, though, has been really shitty, Gianni. So I get what you're saying. I definitely think he has upside. It was a good play this week. But I do understand the lack of love, right? He's the sort of player that, like, lately, it's like, what have you done for me other than that 5th place finish? That's huge. Congrats. I appreciate that. You said you live in Minneapolis, so you went to the 3M and your friends both got fist bumps from Tony. Oh, yeah, you got beef with them because he ignored you on the fist bump. I've had a few players do that to me, right? Big time me out there on the golf course. I've also had some guys go above and beyond and be absolute champs. So maybe he was after a bad hole or something like that and wasn't feeling up to it, but I wouldn't let it get to you. And the 3M Open, I've never been to. Looks like an absolute fantastic time out there. I've got a few betting buddies that live up that direction. So one of these years, I've told them I'm going to head up there. So if you're heading up there again, let me know, and maybe we can get together. I'll buy you a beer or something. That's what I tell all my fans. If I see them at the golf course, if you're a water drinker, you don't drink for whatnot, I'll buy you a water out there, right? We'll walk and talk. We'll watch a few holes together, and then head on our separate ways. Unless I really like you, maybe we'll hang out longer. But probably head our separate ways after a hole. All right, let's talk through this a little bit. So I've gone through DFS. If you're just here for DFS, by the way, guys, best of luck with all of your exposure tomorrow. Just go ahead, smash the like button as a little bit of a parting gift for me, and go out there and take down a GPP or two. But we've got some business to attend to over here on props, because as you heard me say before, I lost money around them. I don't like losing money out there on my props. In fact, nothing pisses me off more than losing money on my props. And if there's one thing that I like to do is to get after those sports books. So you guys know that we're going to be going after it. And honestly, I think round 2 can play a little bit harder than round 1. The pin locations, might be a little bit softer. The wind conditions are certainly going to be the biggest factor, though. And I think with this PM wind, you might want to take some unders on guys going off early. That would be for strokes, of course, and then maybe overs for guys that are going off later on. On sites like Underdog, we can actually get a better payout if we anti-correlate it a little bit. And based on these wind conditions, I think it could be like a completely different golf course later on. So a lot of times the anti-correlation can be a little bit of a doozy to go out there and enter because you're anti-correlating, right? It's exactly as it sounds, right? You're doing things that have, opposite outcomes in mind. But when we have a weather situation like this, it makes sense to anti-correlate, right? They don't distinguish between the waves when they go out there with correlation. So if you were to fade guys going off later, then maybe take like an over on birdies for an early starter, you're going to get a higher payout, even though the conditions are going to change. So that's kind of why I like these slates when it comes to props, because we can find different spots to attack that don't lower our payout. Like, for example, if we took 2 unders on strokes on Prize Picks or Underdog, we're going to get a slightly lower payout most times. We don't have to make that the case here tomorrow because the conditions are going to change a little bit throughout the day. So in terms of our averages for round one, we also are going to talk some live golf stuff here in a little bit as well, but we're going to start with PGA. The stroke average today was a little bit under 1 under par. Birdie average was 3.75 per round. That was actually a little bit lower than what we had last year. So that was maybe the main difference when it came to scoring. Your bogey average was 2.45 per round. Last year it was 2.4. So hardly any difference when it came to the bogeys. So this scoring average, right, last year was like 1.3 under par. The reason for that was the lack of birdies out there for today. Your fairway average went down a little bit, was definitely firmer and faster this year than what we had for 2023. So it was about 0.5 fairways lower per round. So that's definitely at least a change I wanted to point out. And then your green average went down about 0.1 per round. So nothing went crazy in either direction, right? It was like a 0.2 difference out there with birdies. Biggest difference, I guess, was the 0.5 out there with fairways. But these sort of averages, I think, are going to get a little bit worse tomorrow. Your birdie average might go down a little bit with the higher winds. Your bogey average is probably going to go up to like at least 2.55 per round. But then I would expect the fairway average and GIR average to go down marginally as well. So a lot of that because of the PM winds. Morning wave, probably a little bit less affected because of the lower winds at that time. So I'm not sure if we have boards yet. Obviously, we went live before they would have posted them. So let's see. So we do have stuff over here on Underdog. And let's see if we have anything on Prize Picks quite yet. What the heck is going on here? Let me take it off the screen just in case it's like going to bring up personal information. I've never had to give me a CAPTCHA over here on Prize Picks before. Let's see. Did it just really make me hold a button? And it's apparently going to prove that I'm not a bot. This is the worst CAPTCHA system I think I've ever seen in my entire life. Press and hold. Yeah, because a bot definitely can't press and hold a button. Like, come on now. If I was designing a CAPTCHA system, that would probably be the opposite of what I'd do. All right, well, I can't get Prize Picks to load for some reason. If anyone else is having issues with that as well, I guess let me know, but it literally won't bring up the board for me for whatever reason. So, all right, let's look through this Underdog board, I guess, while we can on here. So if you were going to take some like unders on strokes or overs on birdies, it'd be for morning wave golfers. So just at first glance here, I don't think Hovland should be at 69 strokes. And I guess you could say the same thing about Sam Burns. 3.5 birdies for Sam Burns. Oh my God. They had the same number for round one and he smashed it in 6 holes. So maybe that's not the worst idea, but let's keep looking through these. So you got Connors going off early. He's at 4 birdies and also at 69 strokes. Like, I don't think that's the worst lean. You got Hideki going off early. He's at 4 birdies. Who else? There's Matty Fitz. He's actually at 69.5. I actually like this board, especially because like the early guys look like they're priced just like the PM guys are. And there is going to be a distinct difference in conditions, as we were talking about before. So 69.5 on Jordan Spieth. He actually had a pretty decent round today. Yeah, I got to say, I disagree with where they have this board priced. Like, you got Sahith at 69.5. Like, that's a pretty decent line there. Like, shoot -1. Just to give you some perspective here, guys, 42 of the 70 players shot -1. So, right, well over half the field. These guys are better than the field average, and they've got the early tee time. So, I think I know what we're going to do here for some exposure is we're going to try and find some early tee times at 69.5 that are just better than average players. So Sahith is at 10:25, right? I don't think it's the best tee time. I would rather him be teeing off just a little bit earlier, right? Same thing with somebody like a Jordan Spieth, for example. But Matty Fitz at a 9 a.m. tee time, like that's pretty much what we're looking for right there. Let's see who else had a 69.5 line. So I know Matty Fitz was an option. I guess it was it just Jordan? I guess Adam Scott, but Adam Scott's a little bit of a step down in talent level. Jason Day is a little bit of a step down in talent level, so I tend to agree with that one there. I guess 10 a.m. is not the worst tee time. It's just not like it's not 9, it's not 8:30 like you're going to get on some other players. But a Sahith, a Jordan Spieth, like I know that Jordan. By the way, I faded Jordan today. Did not work out well out there from one of my props. But like to shoot -1, that's not asking that much. Again, 42 of the 70 players were able to accomplish that. So we want to stick to early tee times to try and avoid some of the issues later on. So I'm just trying to like spitball ideas right now, trying to figure out what we're going to do. Let me bring up DraftKings. Let me bring up Caesars and FanDuel real quick so we can do a little bit of line shopping, see what we have for comparison over there. Not sure if they're going to have their boards posted quite yet, but we can obviously check and see what they have. Let me share this for you guys so you're not just staring at my face. All right, so here's DraftKings. We have golf on the left. We don't. We're going to have to bring it up ourselves. Okay, so we do have lines posted on DraftKings, which means we for sure are going to have them on Caesars. And then let's go over here to FanDuel, which if they all have them up, that would be great. And look at that. We do. We got beautiful boards over there on all three sites. So I'm going to start with FanDuel because they seem to be the most accurate, in my opinion, based on like what I've noticed over here on these boards. Victor Hovland is 68.5. Okay, I wanted to see that one. Where are guys like Jordan Spieth and Matty Fitz? That's the question I want to see on here. So Morikawa is at 67.5, and he is juiced a little bit over. Sahith is even money at 68.5. And we have a Jordan Spieth line is, I guess, the question. It doesn't look like we're going to have a Jordan Spieth line. So I like the Sahith prop quite a bit here. The issue with Fitz is he's playing dog shit golf right now. I mean, if he had been playing any sort of decent golf lately, I'd be a much more okay with taking Matty Fitz. I do have to say that at least he hit the ball okay today, right? He lost most of his strokes out there at the putter. So, all right, we're going to go with these top two for our first slip here on stream. So I'm going to go ahead and enter it over here on the side. I obviously use a different account than the one you guys see here on live stream to go out there and get my personal exposure. But it's going to be these two guys. It's going to be the Matty Fitz under, the Sahith under. The Sahith prop, he's posted an entire stroke lower over there on books. So I think that one's probably going to get bumped here relatively soon, I would imagine. That one's, at least when people see the boards, right? They're probably going to like figure that out and get some exposure. So let's take those now before that potentially happens. Let's see. I hate the payouts on these, though. You know what? Let's find a fade to mix in. So you guys know I had mentioned like the PM conditions are going to be a little bit harder. Let's try and find a fade to help out with the payouts a little bit. His fist is 4 times the size of yours. Yeah, dude, he's got some middens out there. That's for sure. Who else? Lucas Glover, too. Guy's got massive ass hands. It's crazy. And I know that because I've shooken his hand before, and his hand felt like a literal rock. It's probably just the calluses that he has from hitting so many golf balls. But man, oh man, that shit's crazy. Of course, guys. Prize Picks has everyone lower by at least a half a stroke. It's good to know. And I have got no idea why I can't get the board to load here. I mean, you guys could see what was happening before, of course. But let's see what they've got. So Morikawa's at 68. So they're all at least 0.5 lower, like you said. So 0.5 lower on a Vic Hovland, 1 stroke lower on Sahith. Where's Matty Fitz? So yeah, Matty Fitz is there at 69 strokes. There's the Sam Burns I'm just like scrolling through these to see what we're dealing with. Tom Kim, Victor Hovland. Okay. 69 on a few players that didn't have their best first round. I guess that makes sense in a few cases. All right. Let's see if we can find a later starter for a fade, which I think the PM wave is actually going to be pretty hard tomorrow. Maybe a half a stroke harder, maybe even worse when it comes to the scoring average. There's not a ton of PM guys that they have on the leaderboard here, but let's see what we can find. And I think ideally like an over on bogeys is probably how we'd want to approach that. So let me refresh this, see if they've got stuff posted, because it didn't look like they had bogey stuff up, at least for like everyone in the field. So they do have a Lowry bogey line. You at least want to throw that in the shopping cart. Not sure if he's going to be the guy that we take. Do they have a Wyndham Clark bogey line? Okay, that might be it. What else do we got? Is he at 1.5? No, he's at 2 bogeys. Yeah, not going to fade Sanjay. Sanjay's got the magic putter lately, so we'd probably avoid a fade on his part because he'll just make all the putts, knowing him. Let's see, Justin Thomas, not fading him. I like him a lot this week. So yeah, this is probably the slip. Oh, we're going to make it a 2-man just because the Matty Fitz prop is only a 0.5 discrepancy. So just to like out of principle, I'm going to do it this way. So I'm going to take an over 2.5 bogeys on Wyndham Clark and then an under on Sahith Theegala strokes. And I'm going to play that for about 1.25 units. We'll say we'll round it off to that sort of number. So that ended up paying off a little bit over 3.25x for the payout on there. And a lot of that's because we're anti-correlating it, but we've got the earliest tee time versus the later tee time. We've got a stroke discrepancy on Sahith, right? He's at 68.5. If you didn't see that over here on the prize pick side. And then Wyndham Clark, bogey average today, by the way, was 2.45 per round. Let me bring up the PGA site. I'll show you his bogey avoidance, which, if you couldn't guess, is not very good for Wyndham Clark. He's a very aggressive player, and you'll see that out here with this bogey average. But I think the bogey average is going to go up at least to like 2.6, if not like 2.75 per round, especially for like the PM wave players that are going to be playing when the winds are kicked up and also when it's a little bit firmer and faster. So let me go ahead and share my screen. We'll show you what I'm talking about. So Wyndham Clark, wrong section. So you can see in here, he's number 95 on tour. That's about average, right, out there in the PGA Tour. So if we think the average of the field is going to be like 2.75, you got to keep in mind that this field is much stronger than your average PGA Tour event. That puts him at like 3 bogeys per round, because if he's an average PGA Tour player, that means he's well below average in this field when it comes to bogey avoidance. And if it's going to be like 2.75 per round, you would see why I would take that over. Now, we won't have lines for comparison on like FanDuel or Draftkings when it comes to bogey stuff, but if we go over here on Caesars, they normally have guys posted. So you'll see here like Max Homa, for example, is like even money at 2.5. So it's obviously not juiced way over, but you're kind of getting the idea. And look at this. Like Wyndham Clark actually does have a line for comparison. He's even money because of the fact that he makes a shit ton of bogeys. These other guys like Fleetwood that are known for bogey avoidance, right? They're juiced like minus 200 over. The big difference with Wyndham Clark is, first off, his driving inaccuracy and the fact that he's average at best in the category on tour. So that would be what I would do for a little bit of a slip. As I said, the wind conditions are going to be the story out there, and it's going to change quite a bit as the day goes on. So if you're treating the PM guys the same as you're treating the AM guys, I think you're making a mistake. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do that. And that's what I would do over there in Underdog. In terms of prize picks, I think that the AM guys are probably a little bit more appropriately priced, but maybe the fades are easier to find over here. So, I haven't gone through and done comparisons on the PM guys yet, but we might be able to find some easier fades, which I'm going to take a look at this birdie board first, but let's see what we got. 4.5 birdies on Xander Schauffele. Now that seems a little low. Do we have lines here on FanDuel? Now that's just like my initial reaction, guys. I don't know if it's as good a line as what I'm thinking, but it feels mighty fine low for Xander Schauffele. Let's see. So Xander Schauffele is at 4.5. He is minus 125 over. So yeah, not quite the crazy sportsbook odds that I thought we might see there. But he's got an early-ish tee time. He hit the ball really well today. How many birdies did he make? I believe he had like 5 on the round. Let's double check. He had 4. He had no bogeys out there in round 1. And it's not like he did anything that great, right? He gained, 3 strokes to the field. Everything was about a stroke gained at best to the field in any one category. And the scorecard, he took care of both par 5s, but there are plenty of easy holes he left on the table as well. So like hole 6, pretty straightforward. Hole 9's a pretty good birdie look, especially from the fairway where he was hitting from. Let's see, hole 11 was only 150 yards. He missed from 5 feet, 4 feet actually, out there for birdie. He left a lot out there. So, I mean, like hole 15, he could have easily made that putt. 17, he could have easily made that putt. Oh, yeah. This feels like a decent spot because like even his birdies weren't anything crazy, right? 2 putted for birdie, or maybe it was a chip over there in hole 3, but he was greenside in 2, nonetheless. This putt was an 11-footer. That's routine for Xander Schauffele. He made a nice 15-footer on hole number 1, but everything else routine, right? Even this hole 16 birdie where he was greenside in 2 gave himself a little bit more work than he probably would have hoped for with an 8-footer, but these are all things that you're expecting him to convert on. You make that hole one at hole 11, and he had 5 today. So better tee time. He's going to have relatively low wins. I'm not against that at all. Let's see. He's at 4.5 over here on this site too, by the way. So it's not like he's only there. What do we have for Scotty Scheffler birdies? Is he also at 4.5? Oh, okay. We're playing Scotty Scheffler birdies. 100% we are. I just got to find a pairing for it now. We could go with Xander at 4.5. The issue with these birdie lines is that the payouts are horrible on them. So you can see, right, if it's like 2 overs on birdies, it's going to be 2.58x. So for the sake of this, we're going to find another fade just because the payout would be utter dog shit otherwise. So let's see what we've got on here. So they have Tommy Fleetwood 68.5. He's 68 on Prize Picks, right? Let's see. Yeah, actually, no, he's at the same number over there on that site. So one of the few examples of somebody that was not 0.5 higher. Let's see, Brian Harmon's at 69.5. What is he over here? Probably 69, if I had to guess. Let's see. No line for Brian Harmon, I guess. Don't want to fade JT. I've already mentioned that. Don't love the idea of fading Morikawa either. He's a pretty good course fit here. Damn, yeah, there's not that many PM guys, except for like the pure studs, right, out there in that wave. Yikes. I was hoping we'd have better guys to use. Like, obviously, the Wyndham Clark one I like quite a bit. I guess we could consider a fade of Aubert. Aubert did look pretty shitty out there today. I can't lie. He looked a little bit lost. Problem is he's at 2.5 bogeys, right? It's not even like he's at 2, which is probably where he should be. What is his strokes line? He's probably 68.5, right? He's at 68 actually over there in Prize Picks. So now, this freaking line though, I really want to play. I really want to play this Scotty line. If you can't tell, this Scotty line should be at 5, no doubt about it. And in fact, if you take a look at the line over here in the books, right, he's minus 170 over. So I guess we could just eat the payout, just accept the fact that it's going to be lower than we'd like. Which, what would it look like if we did that? It would still be 2.58x. I guess we could go Xander. Could fade Lowry, right? I didn't see this Lowry one before, right? But Lowry was somebody I was looking at for a potential fade. Let me do some backwards math on here. So they have Lowry at birdies. They do not have him posted. What is his strokes line on Prize Picks? If he has one, of course. So he's at 69 strokes. If I had to give him a birdie line, I'd probably put him at 4. So Maybe not the worst idea for an over at 2.5 bogeys. Now, what were your shots gained metrics like? I guess that'll be the kicker out there for Shane Lowry for us. To show you the Wyndham Clark stuff, by the way, let's find Wyndham Clark here on the shots gained. There he is. So you can see here, right? He lost a little bit with the putter, gained around the green, gained with the flat stick, but lost off the tee. I have to say, nothing that crazy, nothing really to point out really there with Wyndham Clark. But let's look at Lowry. Maybe it's a little bit more interesting for him. So gained on approach, lost off the tee, lost around the green. He had, 2 bogeys in the round out there, round 1. It's going to be much harder conditions out there in the afternoon, right? It's going to be a lot windier than you had today. It's probably going to be pretty firm and fast. Let's do that. So this will be another slip too. I've got to say these bogey lines, I think are decent leans. I like the AM stuff a little bit better. So like the Scotty and the Sahith line are probably my favorite out of those 4 props that we've taken. So if you do want to just take maybe the Sahith under on strokes and mix it in with Scotty, I guess I couldn't blame you for doing so. But the payouts are just utter dog shit, right? If we decide to correlate it like the way that we'd like to. So I am going to enter this anti-correlation slip, which might be sub-ideal, but it's worth taking with the kind of line value that we have there. What you'll see down there is that this also pays 3.27x, which is a pretty decent payout out there for a 2-man card. So that's another slip on Underdog. And now let's try and do something here on Prize Picks, which I think the board on Underdog is probably just a lot better than what we have here in Prize Picks, because based on the lines that we have here, we would probably want to take fades, right? Just because they have guys lower and whatnot, like the line value would indicate maybe taking fades. But I don't know if I agree with that, right? Like I think early it's going to play pretty easy. So what we can do now is we're actually going to take a look at some of the live golf stuff, because if we do want to take fades and we mix in a live golf prop, we can get a regular 3x payout. So that's another one of the beauties of having this board on here, is that we can mix in like something over here with the PGA prop, and no matter what direction we're taking, we're going to get a normal payout on it. So just to show you the live golf stuff from last year, this is the golf course, by the way, where Bryson shot a 58. Very easy course. It played like 3 strokes under par for the entire field last year. And that's including the slap dicks towards the bottom of the leaderboard. So expect to see some crazy scoring. To show you the weather forecast as well. So, okay, yeah, we got it on the HRRR forecast. You see that there's supposed to be a little bit of rain that comes through in the afternoon, but there's next to no wind out there. So it's going to be pretty much perfect conditions. It's been rainy in the area all week. So the scoring averages from last year, which were about as good as they can get at a golf course, are probably going to stay about the same. So this minus 2.91 scoring average, it's probably going to be around -3 again. And your birdie average is probably going to be about the same as well. That being said, they've got guys at like 4.5 under par. They've got even like guys that aren't that good at like 3.5 under par, like Ortiz, Lahiri, Matthew Wolf. It feels like a little bit of an overreaction. So I actually don't think that there are probably a few fades on here that we can consider. And I'll point out a few of them here in a second. Let's catch up on chat, see what we're doing. Any fades? I like for the guys with late tee time. So yeah, I liked a few of those, right? Shane Lowry, Wyndham Clark. But I've got to say, I feel a little bit worse about the fades than I do like the supportive stance plays. But they do help us out a whole lot when it comes to the payouts. What's up, Luke? What do I think about Tony Finau at 69 strokes? I think that he's got decent push equity at -1. The tee time is solid as well. The guys at 69.5, I just think have a little bit more utility because they do only have to shoot -1. To cover a 69 line, they do have to get to -2. And while having the push equity is nice, I've been finding myself trying to take more 0.5s than even numbers just because the push rolls don't normally help you out. So I think he's a decent play. If he was at 3.5 birdies, I would really like it for an over, but I'm guessing he's at 4. What about taking some live props with the PGA? Yep, that's a really good idea, right? I just mentioned that. But yeah, that's something I do all the time over there on the Patreon. So definitely something we'll probably do. Brooks Koepka is -175 for the over 66.5 strokes and is 66 on Underdog. What sportsbook, Mason, has those lines? Is it a Bovada that has them? Because none of the big books have live golf lines for strokes. So that would be my one hesitation with that. So, and you can see, right, he's at the same line on Prize Picks, which I think makes a little bit of sense. And I didn't realize that they had a board over here on what is it, this site, Underdog. So let's see how they do, right? They do have that board posted. So yeah, we'll have it on both sites, I guess, to mix in. And see, I'm guessing they copy and pasted it. It's usually what Underdog does. They just copy and paste the live board. Intriguing. All right, let's catch up on chat. I do want to know where that line was posted, by the way, Mason. How about mixing in the live stuff? Yep, I agree with that. Lowry over bogeys, I like that. Cam Young, I could see it. The one thing I'll say about Cam is that he's been really hitting the ball well lately, so I don't know if I'd count on him having a shitty round. Patrick Rogers over 3.5 birdies, probably not. The reason why I say probably not is that you're taking him from like the 50-50 perspective for a prop, and he is clearly a below average player, right? So if the average birdies per round is like 3.75 per round, that probably puts him at a rate about 3.5 projection. So I'd have to run the actual numbers to see where I have him, but I'd have to imagine he's probably at rate about 3.5. So yeah, I not like I'd be telling you to take the under by any means, but yeah, I don't know if he's the best overplay. So taking a look at these, and I'm genuinely curious who has those lines posted over there for Live Golf, because to my knowledge, no one has been posting those. And if Brooks Koepka is minus 170 towards the over, then I mean, obviously some of these other slap dicks at 66.5 would be even higher odds out there for the over. So I'm still waiting on the comment to tell us where that came from. But if that's legit news, I think there could be something there to be had. Just kind of spitballing some ideas. I thought this Lahiri over was something that stood out to me at first. This Matthew Wolff over, which, yeah, you can see here is also at 66.5 strokes. Carlos Ortiz even, you could throw into that same kind of conversation. These three players, the reason why I say this, are not the same kind of players as a Burmester, a Gooch, who's one of the best players on the Live Tour, a Louis, who's won multiple times in 2024, a Patrick Reed, right? He's one of like the top 15 players over there on the Live Golf Tour. Guys like Ortiz, Lahiri, and Wolff are like league average. Now they're not dog shit players, right? There's a reason why they're at 66.5 strokes. But when you just compare lines to lines, like these sort of guys compared to the other guys at 66.5, like something's obviously wrong, right? Either these guys are too high, like a Reed, Oosthuizen, and all of them. They should probably be at like 66 strokes, or these guys are too low. It's one of the two. Neither one can't be the case, right? It's got to be at least one of those two things that's the case out there. So I wish I knew that sportsbook that has those lines posted, but if that's legit, I might have to nuke some of these lines over here between Lahiri, Wolff, and whatnot. Bet365. So there's one thing I'll say about that, Mason. Bet365 has the worst sportsbook odds of all the books out there. So if you compare them to like FanDuel, DraftKings, all of them out there, they'll consistently be off from them, right? So if there's one book to take with a grain of salt, it is this tour. But I'm going to bring up the numbers just to show chat. I don't think it can hurt to take a look at them. But yeah, if there's a site to really not use for plus EV analysis, it's Bet365, because they get it wrong more than just about anyone else. But let's see. So where's the Live Golf stuff? Is it towards the bottom? I don't know. I don't see Live Golf on here, man. Not sure about that. I'll take your word on it, though. What I will say, though, is I'll give you that little bit of a nugget about the fact that they're not the most accurate. So even if that is the case, just I guess keep that in mind. So if you're going to do anything over here, I'm going to pick this Lahiri fade as my favorite out of the bunch. I'm not sure how he played it this course last year, so let me actually bring up the leaderboard real quick, which might be able to help us out with trying to find the best fade. Let me get this comment off the screen as well. So if we're taking a look at this, where did Lahiri place? Did he actually play pretty well? Okay, so T18 for Lahiri. He went 69 last year, 66, 65. So he did cover in 2 of his 3 rounds. Let's see who had a poor go of it at this golf course. So Kevin Na, a lot of guys that aren't even playing this week. There's Patrick Reed. There's DJ. DJ went over in one of the 3 rounds. Bubba Watson went 67, 68, 68. So he would have went over in all 3 rounds, and he did still finish T29. So that's worth pointing out there. Lahiri actually played pretty well here. Ortiz did too, right? I was looking at that potential fade. And then where's Matthew Wolff? I know Matthew Wolff had a good week because he almost won this golf tournament last year. So I guess out of all of them, Lahiri did play the worst. I got to say, though, the form for Lahiri has actually been pretty decent. If you take a look at the shots gained metrics recently, gone T6, T18, second, and then I guess the last 2 finishes weren't all that great. But yeah, he played this Asian tour event over there in England and actually lost strokes to the field. So that's not ideal for Lahiri. I'm kind of stuck on this live golf board. The reason why I say I'm kind of stuck on it is that this golf course is easy as ever living hell, but these numbers are just all way too low. Like, as I said, like these lines on guys are just, it's ridiculous to have guys like 4.5 strokes under par. But if there's a course to have that at, it's this live golf event, right? Someone shot 58 at this golf course last year, right? I think that tells you a lot of what you have to know here. Andy Ogletree's actually been playing some decent golf. It's like maybe you take an under on his strokes. Let's see. I guess let's see if they have his like stats on here for Andy Ogletree. T6, obviously at the last live event, but it's been a lot of shit otherwise. So yeah, probably not. Probably not out there on that sort of player. So I've got to say, this live golf board, I don't know if I'm going to play it as much as I initially thought. I thought that some of these fades, like especially this like Lahiri one was the first one that was kind of sticking out to me. I'll point out the few other ones I was looking at too. I already pointed out those 2. I guess it was just those 3. And then for birdies, I guess you could argue a lot of the same. Like if you could find a really shitty birdie maker, like maybe you'd want to take them for like an under 4.5. But like, for example, Charles Schwartzel hasn't played very much golf on live golf recently. He's been dealing with an injury. So like maybe you could target him. Round 2 is probably the spot to get the most exposure to out here for live golf. So I'm going to sit this one out for now, I think. But if I'm going to enter anything, it's probably like these 2 props. And I wouldn't do them together, right? I wouldn't enter this for like 2.5x. The way I would do this is I'd like pick maybe this like Lahiri fade and then try and find something over here in Prize Picks to mix it with. So I am trying to give you guys a slip here to enter, but Prize Picks just doesn't seem like the place to play, right? Particularly with like the PGA side. I think that the Underdog board just looks a lot better than what we have over here. I just tend to agree with these projections a little bit more than what we have on Underdog. Let's see. So PM fade. Looking for like a PM starter, maybe like 69 strokes. That's not that good. A lot of 69.5s. I think it would make sense for fades if they were 0.5 higher. Oh, come on now. You don't got to take the board down while we're looking at it. Let's scroll back down here. Chris Kirk. Oh, this might be it. I like this Chris Kirk fade a lot. A lot. And let's see what his line is if he has one. So I don't see a line there in DraftKings. Let's see if I don't think he had one here on FanDuel either. Yeah, so he's not going to have anything to compare to. But I can tell you right now, I'm going to like that line. So let's take this Chris Kirk prop and take it with Lahiri. I'm just going to suck it up and play this because I want to have something here for the live stream. But I've got to say, taking a fade at a golf course that's playing 3 strokes under par, this is the hesitation, right? It's playing to a 67 scoring average, right? So yeah, if he has an average day, he's going to go over, but that's what he has to do, right? He has to have an average day to go over. It's just like, it's craziness. Normally that's not the case, right? Normally these guys are like 0.5 to an entire stroke lower. It's just a little bit of a different beast over here for this week. So obviously this is the power of having live golf props at our disposal, is that we can mix them and get better payouts over there on those kind of slips. So I'm going to take this over on Chris Kirk strokes, also this over on Artemon Lahiri. And I would use that same kind of strategy over here on Underdog. So just like it washes away the multiplier on Prize Picks, like if we went down here and we found Lahiri, who I'm almost positive has a line here. So yeah, you can see he's over there at 66.5 strokes. You could take that And just to show you what I'm talking about here, like enter any prop, right? This is just a random one. I'm going to click here and it's going to pay you 3x. So if there's a line over here that you really wanted to enter and you didn't want to worry about the correlation, you'd be able to get exposure to it that way. So for now, I'm going to leave our exposure over here on Prize Picks, but I'll probably be doing a lot of that same stuff over there on Underdog. We'll take a look at pick 6 here real quickly here in a minute. I do want to catch up on chat for a second, and then we're going to hop on out of here. So if you guys haven't already hit that like button, maybe you're just joining us and haven't gotten around to doing so, go ahead, do so, pump up those numbers before we hop on out of here, and also subscribe to the channel as we're doing the same things for rounds 3 and 4. So if you found this helpful, make sure to check that out. And for all of my prop exposure, all the actual slips that I'm entering, make sure to check out the Patreon page on there. I'm posting them as I'm getting to them, so you guys can catch anything before bumps. Where were we at? Round 2 board on Prize Picks is up. Thoughts on the Fleetwood under? So yeah, I was just going through with a few of the lines on there. It would have been helpful if you would have included the lines with those players, if I'm going to be honest, but I guess we'll just bring it up. So you said Hideki and like Fleetwood under. If you're going to do that, do it on Underdog, right? So I know you said like the under on those 2 players. I would not take them over there because they have better lines available. So 68.5 right over here on Underdog. What was Fleetwood at? I think Fleetwood might be at the same exact number, but like particularly with Hideki, like make sure you're getting the best line available. So do some line shopping, I would say. And you said thanks again for the feed on the last stream, of course. And yeah, my feedback, Jordan, would be just do a little bit of line shopping, right? I agree with your sentiment. Like I think some unders on AM players would make some sense, but just do it on the right site where you're going to get slightly better value. I know the 0.5 bumps don't seem like all that much, but it has a really big impact on your long-term ROI. The difference between a push and a hit on a single stroke is massive long-term. So yeah, just check them out on that site. Wolf racked up 20 birdies last year. Whether it could lead to another birdie festival, I agree with that. Yeah, and it would be hard not to say that, right? It played 3 strokes under par, but at the same time, it played 3 strokes under par, and they have the board 3.5, 4.5 strokes under par, right? So obviously the average is higher than both of those numbers. So half the field, maybe even more than half the field, is still going to go over those kind of lines. So that's why I say it's a tough one, right? Because you don't want to take fades at an easy golf course, but they're also getting lines that are too low, right? So it's a little bit confusing, right? It's a little bit of a conundrum where you know which side has the value, but you don't want to do it because of the golf course. You're like, this is you just feel shitty, right? Rooting against players at an easy ass golf course. But honestly, in terms of plus EV, I think it's quite clear that that side is the side to go with. Let's check on pick 6. If you have any last second questions, guys, just let me know down in chat because we're going to be hopping on out of here in just a few minutes. In terms of pick 6 exposure, we don't have the biggest board. These guys at 4.5, I have to say, all make quite a bit of sense to be at 4.5 birdies. But much like the other sites, I think we might be able to play a little bit of a weather edge here. You're not going to get the correlation-based payouts, but you are at least going to be able to find, pieces of value on either side of the draw. So let's see. Fantasy points I'll usually kind of avoid. Same thing with pars over there in that kind of site. So, not my favorite board, actually. Like at all. Oh, I promised I'd look at this. So let me see if we can find anything on here. But like maybe a Morikawa over on birdies, but he's got the late tee time. Like Hideki's got an early tee time, but he's about it. Like I guess Cantlay does too. But we got Scotty Scheffler at 4.5 birdies, right? So like why even take Hideki or Patrick Cantlay for birdies when you can take Scotty Scheffler at 4.5 birdies and Underdog? So that's why it kind of feels bad looking at that kind of board. And then this strokes board, these guys at 68.5, you can get it to like 69 strokes on Underdog. So yeah, nothing I like on pick 6. That's the God honest truth there. I do not like that board. That's all I've got for the round 2 live stream, guys. Hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared for all of your exposure and are ready to get after it for Friday's action. It should be a fun one. Got the FedEx Cup playoffs on the line. It's a feel-good Friday, you guys name it. Let's go out there and get this weekend started the right way. I appreciate your support here on the channel. As I said, smash that like button if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. And let's go out there and make this weekend one to remember. Hopefully, we can see a bunch of you guys at the top of those GPPs, and hopefully we see you guys cashing out on a few of those prop slips as well.